Jake Morrison leaned against the bar at the Galactic Consortium's annual trade summit, nursing an overpriced drink that tasted like battery acid mixed with orange juice. The station's artificial lighting made everything look too bright, too clean, and way too expensive for a guy like him. He was just a freight hauler from Ohio, and right now he felt completely out of his depth among the alien dignitaries in their formal wear and fancy translator devices. His cargo ship was docked 3 levels down, and he was only here because the payment processing system had glitched. Something about cross-species currency verification taking longer than usual. So instead of heading home like he wanted, Jake was stuck killing time at this reception, surrounded by creatures that looked like they'd stepped out of a fever dream. To his left, a group of insectoid aliens discussed trade routes and clicking sounds that made his teeth hurt. To his right, some floating jellyfish things were literally glowing different colors at each other in what he assumed was conversation. And directly in front of him was a buffet table full of food he didn't recognize and wasn't brave enough to try. Jake took another sip of his terrible drink and wondered, not for the first time, why he'd ever left Earth. That's when the crystalline alien approached him. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and its body looked like it was made entirely of pale blue glass or diamond. Light refracted through its surface in strange ways, creating tiny rainbows that danced across the bar. Its eyes were multifaceted like an insect's, but somehow still managed to look intelligent and curious. Human, it said through the small translator device attached to what Jake assumed was its chest. The voice sounded like wind chimes mixed with someone speaking underwater. I notice you bear an unusual marking on your neck. Does this signify rank among your people? Jake blinked, caught off guard. He'd been invisible for the past hour, which was exactly how he liked it at events like this. Now someone was actually talking to him. He reached up automatically and touched the birthmark on the left side of his neck, just below his ear. 3 interlocking circles, each about the size of a quarter, arranged in a triangle pattern. He'd had it since birth, and it had always looked like someone had tried to draw the Olympic rings but gave up halfway through. This? Jake laughed, scratching at it. The mark had been itching all evening, probably from the recycled station air. Nah, it's just a birthmark. Had it my whole life. Nothing special. The crystalline alien tilted its head in a way that seemed curious. Interesting. The pattern is quite symmetrical. On my world, such markings would indicate noble blood. Jake's laugh got louder. He was tired, slightly buzzed from the awful drink, and the absurdity of the situation suddenly hit him. Here he was, a guy who barely graduated high school, hauling boxes across space for a living, being asked if he was nobility. Yeah, sure, he said, grinning. I'm probably the long-lost Prince of Cleveland or something. This birthmark is definitely my royal seal. Any day now, someone's going to show up and tell me I'm heir to a throne made of Buckeyes and Lake Erie water. He was joking, obviously. Making fun of all those old Earth stories about chosen ones and secret princes with mysterious birthmarks. His mom used to read him those kinds of books when he was a kid. The crystalline alien didn't laugh. In fact, it went very still. You jest, it said slowly, but such things are not impossible in the wider galaxy. Before Jake could respond, he noticed something else. A beetle-like alien nearby, the one that had been chittering away at the insectoid group, had gone completely silent. It was staring at him with compound eyes that suddenly seemed way too focused. The beetle creature skittered over with surprising speed, its 6 legs moving in perfect coordination. It was about 4 feet tall, covered in a shiny brown carapace that looked almost like polished wood. When it spoke, its translator made it sound like an elderly woman with a British accent, which was somehow even weirder. Pardon me, it said, interrupting. Did you say you have a birthmark? 3 circles. Jake was starting to feel uncomfortable. Yeah? It's not a big deal, really. Just May I see it? The beetle alien was practically vibrating with excitement now. Please, this is quite important. I guess. Jake turned his head, exposing the mark more fully. What was the harm? It was just a birthmark. The beetle alien pulled out a small device from somewhere in its carapace. The thing looked ancient, like genuinely old, with symbols etched into metal that had been worn smooth by time. Nothing like the sleek technology Jake usually saw aliens carrying around. May I scan it? The beetle asked, and there was something in its voice now. Something that sounded like hope mixed with disbelief. Jake shrugged. Knock yourself out. It's not like it's going anywhere. The beetle alien raised the device, and Jake expected maybe a flash of light or a beep or something simple. Instead, the moment the scanner got close to his neck, everything changed. Golden light erupted from the device, so bright that Jake had to close his eyes. He felt warmth spreading across his skin, not painful but intense, like standing too close to a campfire. The birthmark on his neck started tingling in a way it never had before, almost like it was waking up after a long sleep. When Jake opened his eyes, he saw that the light wasn't just coming from the scanner anymore. It was coming from his birthmark itself, glowing through his skin like someone had installed LED lights under there. The 3 circles were blazing with golden radiance, and the light was spreading, creating patterns in the air that looked almost like writing in a language he didn't recognize. The bar had gone completely silent. Every alien in the room was staring at him. The beetle creature's legs had buckled, and it was making a high-pitched keening sound. The crystalline ambassador had taken several steps back, its facete eyes wide with what Jake was pretty sure was shock. Then the scanner started broadcasting. Every screen in the bar flickered and changed, showing the same thing. Jake's face. His birthmark. And streams of text in dozens of alien languages scrolling past faster than he could read. He caught words here and there through various translators around the room: architect, bloodline, heir, impossible, 12 millennia. What the hell is happening? Jake demanded, but his voice was drowned out by the sudden chaos erupting around him. The beetle alien was on its feet again, screaming something in its own language that the translator couldn't keep up with. Other aliens were pulling out their own devices, scanning him from across the room. Some were backing away like he'd suddenly grown a second head. Others were pushing forward, trying to get closer. Impossible, the beetle alien finally managed in clear translated speech, its voice shaking. The architect bloodline. After 12,000 years. The genetic signature is perfect. It's actually perfect. The what bloodline? Jake asked, but nobody was listening to him anymore. Alarms started blaring throughout the station. Security protocols activated, and Jake saw armored figures rushing into the bar from multiple entrances. They weren't pointing weapons at him, he realized with growing dread. They were forming a protective circle around him, facing outward, keeping the crowd of increasingly excited aliens at bay. A station official, some kind of amphibious creature in a crisp uniform, pushed through to Jake's position. It was breathing hard, its gills flapping rapidly. "Mr. Morrison," it said urgently. "You need to come with us immediately. Right now. Your life just became extremely complicated." "I don't understand," Jake said, his voice rising with panic. "It's just a birthmark. I was joking about the prince thing." "You weren't joking," the beetle alien called out as security started moving Jake toward an exit. "You were prophesying." As they hustled him through corridors, Jake caught glimpses of screens everywhere, all showing his face. News broadcasts in alien languages he couldn't understand. His birthmark glowing in photograph after photograph. And text scrolling beneath in the few human languages he could read: "Lost architect heir discovered. Human carries ancient royal genetic code. Galaxy responds to return of progenitor line." Jake Morrison, freight hauler from Cleveland, Ohio, had made a lot of jokes in his 32 years of life. This was definitely the worst-timed one ever. The secure diplomatic quarters had nice furniture, the kind Jake had only seen in magazines back on Earth. Plush chairs that adjusted to your body automatically, a bed that looked like it cost more than his entire cargo ship, and windows that showed a perfect view of the stars outside. It should have been the nicest room he'd ever stayed in. Instead, it felt like the world's fanciest prison cell. The guards outside weren't there to keep people out. Well, they were, but they were also making it crystal clear that Jake wasn't leaving anytime soon. He'd counted them during his first hour here. 8 guards, all armed with weapons he didn't recognize, standing at perfect attention outside his door. Every time he even looked at the exit, at least 2 of them would shift their stance just slightly. A reminder. That had been 6 hours ago. Since then, representatives from a dozen alien species had already demanded meetings. Jake had refused them all, mostly because he had no idea what to say. What was he supposed to tell them? "Sorry, I'm just as confused as you are, and also I really need to get back to my ship because I have a delivery deadline." "This is insane," Jake muttered, pacing across the room for what had to be the 100th time. His footsteps were silent on the fancy carpet, which somehow made everything worse. Even the floor here was too nice for him. "I haul cargo for a living. I dropped out of college after 1 semester. I'm nobody. I'm less than nobody." "You're not nobody anymore," said Kelly Wright from where she sat on one of the expensive chairs, reviewing something on her datapad. She was the human diplomat who'd been assigned to him about 3 hours ago, fresh off a shuttle from Earth's Embassy 2 systems over. Kelly looked like every government official Jake had ever seen on the news. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, hair pulled back in a bun so tight it probably gave her headaches. She was maybe 40, with the kind of calm professional demeanor that made Jake feel like a kid who'd been called to the principal's office. But he'd caught her hand shaking when she first arrived. Whatever was happening had rattled her too, even if she was better at hiding it. According to the Cathan archives, Kelly continued, setting down her pad and looking at him directly, the architects were the original builders of the portal network. Every single portal that every ship in the galaxy uses to travel faster than light? They built them. All of them. 12,000 years ago. Jake stopped pacing. Okay, but what does that have to do with me? They created the infrastructure that every civilization depends on, Kelly said, and now he could hear the stress creeping into her voice. Power distribution systems. Communications relays. The fundamental technology that holds galactic society together. The architects built it all, and then they vanished without a trace 12,000 years ago. No goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. That's fascinating history, Jake said, running his hands through his hair. It was greasy. He needed a shower. He needed to wake up from whatever nightmare this was. But I'm a freight hauler from Ohio. My biggest accomplishment is that I haven't crashed my ship yet. I don't know anything about ancient civilizations or infrastructure. Kelly stood up and walked over to him. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes. She'd probably been woken up in the middle of the night for this assignment. Jake, listen to me carefully, she said quietly. That birthmark on your neck? The one that's been glowing on and off for the past 6 hours? It's not just a birthmark. It's a genetic marker. A code written into your DNA. The Cathan historians ran it through every database they have. You carry the complete hereditary sequence of the architect ruling line. That's impossible, Jake said automatically. My parents were from Cleveland. My dad worked at a tire factory. My mom was a school teacher. We're about as ordinary as humans get. Were they adopted? Kelly asked. What? No. I mean, I don't think so. Jake frowned. He'd never actually asked. Why would he? I look just like my dad. Same nose, same terrible eyesight, same inability to grow a decent beard. Doesn't matter. This genetic code goes back way further than a few generations. It's been dormant, passed down through thousands of years, probably tens of thousands, waiting for the right trigger. Kelly pulled up a holographic display from her pad. See this? This is a scan of your DNA. These sequences here, highlighted in gold? They're not human. Well, they are, but they're also something else. Something much older. Jake stared at the swirling double helix rotating in the air between them. The golden sections she'd highlighted looked like they were glowing, just like his birthmark had been. So what, aliens experimented on my ancestors? He asked, feeling sick. Not exactly. The current theory, and this is just from the preliminary reports, is that the architects seeded multiple species across the galaxy with sleeper genetic codes. Insurance policies, maybe. Or maybe heirs they were saving for later. Humanity was apparently one of those species, hidden away on Earth, isolated from the rest of the galaxy until we developed our own space travel. This sounds like a bad science fiction movie, Jake said weakly. I know. Kelly actually smiled a little at that. Trust me, I know. But here's what matters right now. That birthmark of yours? It's not just a marker. It's a key. A biological password to architect technology that's been locked away for 12 millennia. What kind of technology? Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Kelly's smile faded. Everything. Power generation systems that could solve the energy crisis for every civilization in the galaxy. Medical databases with cures for diseases we haven't even discovered yet. Manufacturing techniques that could end scarcity. Agricultural advances that could feed trillions. She paused. And weapon systems that make our current military technology look like stone knives. The room suddenly felt very cold. Weapons, Jake repeated slowly. The architects had access to technology that could move stars, Jake. They could manipulate gravity, bend space-time, create and destroy matter at will. If even a fraction of their weapon systems still exist and can be activated. Kelly trailed off. Well. You can imagine why 12 different governments have demanded meetings with you in the past 6 hours. Jake sat down on the expensive bed. His legs felt like jelly. They want me to open these systems for them. Yes. The Valerian Empire has already offered to make you an emperor if you align with them exclusively. The Cathan Collective says you're mentioned in their religious prophecies as a returning savior. I've had 3 different corporate entities offer you enough money to buy a small moon in exchange for access to architect manufacturing technology. Kelly sat down next to him, and for the first time, she dropped the professional mask. She just looked tired. And Earth's government? They're terrified. Of me? Jake asked. Of what you represent. If you're truly the genetic heir to the architects, what does that make humanity? Are we colonizers by proxy? Inheritors of someone else's empire? Or are we just another species that got caught up in an ancient family's drama? She rubbed her eyes. And more importantly, if you can access this technology, every other civilization in the galaxy is going to want a piece of you. Some will want to control you. Some will want to ally with you. And some will want me dead, Jake finished. Yeah. Kelly looked at him seriously. There are extremist groups who believe the architect's return would upset the current balance of power. They're happy with how things are now. They don't want ancient technology reshaping everything. And the easiest way to prevent that is to make sure the heir never gets a chance to unlock anything. Jake thought about the guards outside. 8 of them. With serious weapons. That suddenly made a lot more sense. I didn't ask for any of this, he said quietly. I just wanted to deliver my cargo and go home. I know, Kelly said, and she sounded genuinely sympathetic. But the universe doesn't really care what we want. It just is. And right now, you're at the center of the biggest political situation the galaxy has seen in 12,000 years. A chime sounded. Kelly checked her pad and her face went pale. What? Jake asked, his stomach dropping. Unauthorized ships just entered the system. Multiple contacts, different factions, all converging on this station. She stood up quickly. Security is tracking them, but Jake, this is bad. Some people don't want to wait for diplomatic meetings. They're coming for me, Jake said. It wasn't a question. Station defense is top tier, and Earth has 3 warships in the area that are moving to intercept. You're safe here. But Kelly didn't sound convinced. Jake looked down at his hands. At the birthmark on his wrist that had started glowing faintly, matching the one on his neck. He was just a freight hauler. He delivered packages. He ate terrible station food and watched old Earth movies in his bunk and tried to save enough money to maybe buy a better ship someday. Now he was apparently the heir to an ancient empire, with a target on his back and the power to reshape the galaxy at his fingertips. Kelly, he asked quietly, what happens if I just refuse? What if I say I don't want anything to do with this? She was quiet for a moment. Honestly? I don't know if that's an option anymore. The convoy ship hummed through portal space, a sound like distant thunder mixed with wind chimes that never quite stopped. Jake had been on plenty of ships before, but this one was different. Bigger. Fancier. And way more tense. The ship carried Jake, Kelly, and representatives from 8 major galactic powers, all crammed together in what was supposed to be a diplomatic vessel but felt more like a powder keg. The Valerian delegation stayed in the forward section. The Cathan historians kept to the research labs. The insectoid Chitauri representatives had claimed an entire deck for themselves because they needed different atmospheric conditions. And everyone was watching everyone else with suspicion that you could cut with a knife. Nobody trusted anyone else, but they all needed Jake alive. At least until they figured out what to do with him. The destination was Terminus Prime, the architect homeworld, 3 weeks away even through the portal network. If answers existed anywhere, they'd be there. That's what everyone kept saying, anyway. Jake wasn't so sure. Mostly he just wanted to stop feeling like a piece of meat that every predator in the galaxy was circling around. He couldn't sleep. That was the worst part. Every time Jake closed his eyes, the dreams came. Except they weren't really dreams, were they? They felt too real, too detailed, too much like memories that belonged to someone else. He'd see massive cities being built, structures so tall they pierced the clouds, made from materials that seemed to shift and flow like liquid but held firm as stone. Beings that looked almost human, but not quite, moved through these cities. They were taller, and their eyes had a quality to them that was hard to describe. Ancient, maybe. Like they'd seen too much. In the dreams, Jake watched through their eyes as they built the portal network. He felt their pride and joy as the first portal activated, connecting 2 distant stars. He experienced their wonder as they seeded life on barren worlds, watching civilizations grow and flourish under their guidance. But he also felt their growing horror as those same civilizations turned the gifts they'd been given into weapons. He saw wars that consumed entire solar systems. He watched species they'd helped uplift tear each other apart with technology meant for creation. And he saw their faces, filled with love and terrible sadness, as they made their final choice. Tonight was worse than usual. Jake had given up on sleep around 0200 hours and wandered to the observation deck. It was supposed to be empty at this time, but the ship's schedule didn't account for someone whose brain wouldn't shut off. The observation deck was a circular room with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the swirling chaos of portal space. Colors that didn't exist in normal reality flowed past like oil on water. It was beautiful and nauseating at the same time. Jake pressed his forehead against the cool glass, trying to ground himself in something real. Still having the dreams? Kelly's voice came from behind him. He turned to find her standing in the doorway, holding 2 cups of what passed for coffee on this ship. She was wearing casual clothes instead of her usual suit, and her hair was down. She looked almost human like this, instead of like a government robot. Yeah, Jake admitted. They're getting worse. More vivid. It's like someone's downloading files directly into my brain, except the files are memories that aren't mine. Kelly walked over and handed him one of the cups. The coffee was terrible, synthesized from who knows what, but it was warm and familiar. The medical team says your genetic code is activating. Dormant information waking up because you've been exposed to architect technology. The scanner at the bar, Jake said. That started it. But being on this ship isn't helping. It's an older model, built using some architect-derived technology. Not much, but enough that your body is recognizing it and responding. Kelly stood next to him at the window. What do you see? In the dreams, I mean. Jake took a sip of the awful coffee and tried to put it into words. I saw them today. The architects. They looked like us, Kelly. Like humans, but older somehow. More tired. Like they'd lived too long and seen too much. The xenobiologists think we might actually be descendants of them, Kelly said quietly. That humanity isn't just carrying their genetic code. We might literally be them, or what's left of them, after 12,000 years of evolution in isolation. That thought made Jake's stomach turn. So I'm not even human? You're human, Kelly said firmly. Whatever else you might be, you're definitely human. You like bad coffee and terrible action movies. You complain about cargo regulations and shipping delays. You're from Cleveland, for crying out loud. Doesn't get more human than that. Despite everything, Jake almost smiled. Thanks. They stood in silence for a moment, watching portal space flow past. Then Jake spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. They were crying, Kelly. In the dream, I saw them making some kind of decision. All of them, gathered in this massive chamber that looked like it could hold 1 million people. And they were crying. I could feel their grief like it was my own. They loved the civilizations they'd created, but they couldn't stop them from destroying themselves. And that pain, that helplessness, it was crushing them. Kelly set down her coffee cup. What did they do? I don't know. The dream ended before I could see. But whatever choice they made, it broke their hearts. Jake touched the birthmark on his neck. It was warm, pulsing slightly in rhythm with his heartbeat. I think they left something for me. For whoever came after them. Instructions, maybe. Or a warning. The historians think the archives on Terminus Prime will have answers, Kelly said. If they do, we'll find them in about 2 weeks. And if the answers are something nobody wants to hear. Kelly looked at him seriously. Then we deal with it. Together. You're not alone in this, Jake. Whatever happens, you've got at least one person on your side. An alarm blared through the ship before Jake could respond. Red lights flashed along the walls, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. All personnel, battle stations. We have multiple bogies dropping out of portal space. Unknown vessels on intercept course. This is not a drill. Kelly grabbed Jake's arm. We need to get you to the safe room. Now. But Jake wasn't listening. Through the observation window, he could see ships materializing from portal space. 3 of them, sleek and dangerous looking, with weapons ports glowing with charging energy. They found us, Jake said, his voice hollow. How? We're in the middle of nowhere, between portals. Nobody should have been able to track us. Kelly was already pulling out her communicator, shouting orders to security. The ship shuddered as the first weapon's impact hit their shields. Through the window, Jake saw energy beams lancing through the darkness. The convoy's escort fighters were launching, but they were outnumbered. Life support is failing on decks 3 and 4, someone shouted over the intercom. We need emergency teams now. Jake's birthmark flared with sudden heat. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, like someone had pressed a hot iron against his skin. Golden light started bleeding through his shirt. Jake, what's happening? Kelly asked, backing away slightly. I don't know, Jake said, but that wasn't entirely true. Some part of him, some instinct that wasn't his own, knew exactly what was happening. His body was responding to danger. The architect genetic code was activating defense protocols that had been dormant for 12,000 years. Another impact rocked the ship, harder this time. Jake stumbled and caught himself against the wall. His hand pressed flat against a panel that looked like every other wall panel on the ship. Except this one wasn't like the others. Not really. The moment his skin made contact, the panel lit up with golden light, matching the glow from his birthmark. Symbols appeared, flowing across the surface in a language Jake had never seen but somehow understood. It was like reading English, except the words were alien and ancient and spoke directly to something deep in his DNA. Jake, step away from that. Kelly shouted. But Jake couldn't step away. Information was flooding into his mind. Not memories this time, but knowledge. Instructions. He understood the ship's systems now, could see them in his mind like a three-dimensional map. He saw the failing shields, the damaged life support, the areas where the hull was weakening under the assault. And he saw something else. Hidden systems, built into the ship's infrastructure. Architect technology, dormant and forgotten, woven into the very bones of the vessel. Technology that was responding to him, recognizing him as the heir, waiting for his command. We've got maybe 90 seconds before shields fail completely. The captain's voice cracked with stress. All hands, prepare for. Jake's hands moved across the panel without conscious thought. Golden light exploded from his birthmark, running down his arms like liquid fire, connecting him to the ancient interface. Throughout the ship, systems that had been dead for millennia suddenly came online. Lights flickered on in sections that had never been lit before. Power surged through conduits that shouldn't exist. And weapons that weren't supposed to be part of a diplomatic vessel's specs, deployed from hidden ports along the hull. The attacking ships hit what should have been failing shields and instead encountered a barrier that had been built by the architects themselves. Their weapons' fire didn't just bounce off. It was absorbed, redirected, and sent back at them with twice the force. One of the attacking ships disintegrated instantly. The other two broke off, fleeing back into portal space. Jake collapsed, his hands sliding off the panel. Kelly caught him before he hit the floor. What did you just do? She whispered, her eyes wide. I protected us, Jake said, breathing hard. His whole body felt like he'd run a marathon. I didn't mean to. I just knew I could, and then I did. Around them, the crew was shouting in confusion and relief. Emergency teams were mobilizing. The ship was safe. But Jake saw the way Kelly was looking at him now. And when other people started arriving at the observation deck, he saw the same expression on their faces. Fear. He wasn't just the lost heir anymore. He'd proven he could access the power. He'd shown everyone on this ship that he was dangerous. And Jake had a sinking feeling that was going to make everything much, much worse. Terminus Prime looked like something from a dream, except dreams didn't usually feel this real or this sad. The planet hung in space like a monument to everything that had been lost, its continents visible through wisps of pink and purple clouds that had no business being those colors. But they were, and they were beautiful in a way that made Jake's chest ache. The landing shuttles descended through the atmosphere, and Jake pressed his face against the window like a kid on his first trip off-world. Except this wasn't wonder he was feeling. It was recognition. Some part of him, the part that carried 12,000 years of genetic memory, knew this place. Massive spires reached toward the pink sky, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, stretching across the landscape as far as Jake could see. They were taller than any building on Earth, made from a material that looked like pearl mixed with chrome, and their surfaces were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when Jake looked directly at them. The symbols hurt his eyes, but in a weird way, like trying to read text that was slightly out of focus. But the cities were empty. No people. No movement. No lights in the windows of buildings that could have housed millions. The silence, even from inside the shuttle, felt like mourning. Like the whole planet was a graveyard that had been waiting 12,000 years for someone to come back and remember the dead. 12,000 years, whispered Dr. Rebecca Torres, the archaeologist who'd been assigned to the expedition. She was a small woman, maybe 50, with gray streaks in her dark hair and the kind of excited energy that made her seem younger. These structures haven't aged a day. Not a day. The architects built to last. She was right. Jake could see it now as they got closer to the surface. No rust. No decay. No plants growing through cracks in the pavement. It was like everyone had just walked away yesterday and the planet had been frozen in time, waiting. "It's not natural," muttered one of the Valerian representatives, a scaled alien named Kor who'd been suspicious of everything since they left the station. "Preservation this perfect requires active maintenance. Something is still working here." "Or someone," added Kelly quietly from beside Jake. The shuttles landed in what looked like a plaza near the planet's equator, close to the largest structure Jake had ever seen. It wasn't a spire like the others. It was a pyramid, but calling it a pyramid felt wrong. Pyramids on Earth were big. This thing was incomprehensible. It stretched into the sky so high that its peak disappeared into the pink clouds, and its base was so wide that Jake couldn't see the far corners from where they landed. The moment Jake stepped off the shuttle, he felt it. A pull, like someone had tied a string to his chest and was gently tugging him toward the pyramid. Not forcing, just inviting. Asking. The birthmark on his neck grew warmer, and more memories started flooding his mind. Not his memories. Theirs. He saw this plaza when it was full of people. Beings that looked almost human, dressed in flowing clothes that seemed to change color with their moods. They were laughing, talking, living. Children played near a fountain that Jake could still see, now dry and silent. Couples walked hand in hand. Scholars debated in small groups. It had been alive once. Then the memory shifted, and Jake saw the same plaza empty. He felt the grief of the person whose eyes he was seeing through, felt them looking at the abandoned city and knowing they'd never see it full of life again. Felt them crying as they walked toward the pyramid for the last time. "Jake." Kelly's voice snapped him back to the present. "You okay? You zoned out for a second there." "Yeah," Jake lied. This place is intense." The expedition spread out, with security establishing a perimeter while the scientists immediately started scanning everything in sight. Dr. Torres was practically vibrating with excitement, taking readings and photographs of every surface she could find. But Jake only had eyes for the pyramid. "I need to go there," he said, pointing at it. "Obviously," Kelly said. "That's why we're here. But we're going to do this carefully, with full security, Anne." "No, I mean I need to go there now." Jake started walking before he'd made a conscious decision to move. His feet just carried him forward, following that invisible string pulling him toward the massive structure. "It's calling me." "Jake, wait." Kelly jogged to catch up, and half the security team scrambled to follow. "We need to establish safety protocols first. We don't know what's in there." But Jake wasn't waiting. He couldn't. Every step closer made the pull stronger, made the birthmark warmer, made the memories flood faster. He saw the pyramid being built, block by impossible block, using technology that manipulated gravity itself. He saw ceremonies held in its depths. He saw the architects gathered there for their final meeting, the one where they'd made the choice that ended their civilization. The pyramid's entrance was a massive door, easily 100 feet tall, covered in more of those shifting symbols. As Jake approached, they started glowing. Faint at first, then brighter, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Fascinating," Dr. Torres breathed, her scanner going crazy. "The structure is responding to his presence. Genetic recognition protocols activating after 12 millennia of dormancy." Jake reached out and placed his hand flat against the door's surface. The world exploded into golden light. The massive doors, which probably weighed more than a small city, swung open silently. Not grinding or creaking like ancient doors should. They moved like they'd been oiled yesterday, smooth and perfect. Beyond them was darkness, but as Jake stepped forward, lights began flickering on. One by one, like a wave spreading across an ocean, lights activated throughout the pyramid's interior. They revealed a hole so vast that clouds were literally forming near its ceiling, kilometers above. Columns stretched upward, each one wide enough to land a shuttle inside. The floor was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting everything perfectly. And standing in the center of the hole, waiting, was a hologram. It flickered into existence as Jake entered, taking the form of a woman who looked human but somehow more. She was tall, dressed in simple robes that seemed to flow like water, and her eyes held that same quality Jake had seen in his memories. Ancient. Tired. Sad beyond measure. "Welcome home, Air," she said, and her voice echoed through the vast space like a gentle wind. "I am the archive keeper. I have waited 12,000 years for your bloodline to return." Behind Jake, the entire expedition had gone silent. Even the normally chatty scientists had stopped talking. "Who are you?" Jake asked, his voice small in the enormous space. "I am what remains of the architect consciousness," the hologram said. "A fragment, preserved to guide whoever came after. To explain. To help you understand what you have inherited, and what choice you must make." "Choice?" Jake stepped closer. "What choice?" The archive keeper's expression softened into something like sympathy. "Come. I will show you everything. But be warned, heir, the truth is heavier than any crown could ever be. Your ancestors learned this. Now you must learn it too." The hologram turned and began walking deeper into the pyramid. The lights followed her, revealing corridor after corridor stretching into impossible distances. Jake looked back at Kelly, at Dr. Torres, at the assembled representatives from 8 different civilizations. They were all watching him, waiting to see what he'd do. "I have to go," Jake said. "We're coming with you," Kelly insisted. "No." The word came out firmer than Jake intended. "This is for me. I can feel it. Whatever's in there, whatever she's going to show me, it's meant for the heir. Just the heir." "Jake, we can't let you." "You can't stop me," Jake said, and it was true. He could feel the pyramid responding to him, ready to obey his commands. If he wanted the others kept out, they would be. "I'll come back. I promise. But I need to do this alone." Before Kelly could argue further, Jake turned and followed the archive keeper into the depths. Behind him, he heard Dr. Torres trying to convince Kelly to let him go, heard the security chief arguing they should follow anyway. But the pyramid had made its choice. The moment Jake was far enough inside, the massive doors swung shut behind him with a soft boom that echoed like thunder. Now it was just him, the hologram, and 12,000 years of secrets waiting to be revealed. The archive keeper led him through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked, showing Jake fragments of history with each step. He saw the architects at their peak, creating wonders that made current galactic civilization look primitive. He saw them teaching younger species, nurturing them, watching with pride as their children learned to build their own civilizations. Then he saw the wars. Civilizations turning architect gifts into weapons. Species destroying each other with technology meant for creation. The architects trying to intervene, trying to stop the violence, only to be seen as tyrants trying to control everyone. "We gave them everything," the archive keeper said softly, "and they used it to destroy each other. We tried to guide them, but guidance became control. We tried to withdraw, but withdrawal became abandonment. Everything we did made things worse." They entered a circular chamber, smaller than the entrance hall but still massive. The walls were covered in names, millions of them, maybe billions, written in that flowing architect script. "What is this?" Jake asked. "The memorial," the archive keeper said. "Every person who died in wars fought with architect technology. Every child killed by weapons we created. Every world burned by power we gave them. We watched it all happen. We felt responsible for every death." Jake felt sick. The weight of all those names, all those deaths, pressed down on him like a physical force. "So you ran away," he said. "We made a choice." The archive keeper turned to face him fully. "Come. I'll show you what that choice was. And then, Jake Morrison of Earth, you will have to make your own." "Okay," Jake said, raising his hand slowly. "I'll do it. I'll open the vaults." "Jake, no." Kelly shouted from where she was being held by 2 armed extremists. But their leader, a scarred alien called Vex with too many eyes and not enough mercy, pressed his weapon harder against her temple. "Smart choice, heir," Vex growled through his translator. "Your ancestors were fools who threw away power. But you don't have to be." The extremists had broken into the pyramid 3 hours after Jake had entered it. The archive keeper had shown him everything by then, the whole terrible history of the architects and the choice they'd made. She'd brought him to this central chamber, where the master controls waited, where every system in the galaxy could be accessed if you had the right genetic code. And then Vex and his people had burst through, somehow bypassing the pyramid's defenses. They'd taken the entire expedition hostage, rounded them up like cattle, and dragged Kelly to the control room with a weapon to her head. The message was clear: open the weapons vaults or watch people die. Jake walked to the central control panel, his birthmark blazing with golden light so bright it cast shadows on the walls. The archive keeper's hologram followed him silently, her ancient face unreadable. She'd told him this moment would come. She'd warned him that everyone would want to use him, to make him into what they needed him to be. The control panel was a masterpiece of technology, a circular platform covered in symbols that glowed and shifted under Jake's gaze. It looked organic, almost alive, pulsing with energy that had waited 12,000 years for someone with the right DNA to touch it. The weapons vault requires the full genetic sequence, Jake said, placing both hands flat on the surface. It'll take a minute to verify. Take your time, Vex said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. But not too much time. My finger might slip. Jake closed his eyes as the interface connected with him. Information flooded into his mind like someone had opened a dam. Not just weapons, but everything. The complete architect database, every secret they'd ever kept, every technology they'd ever developed, all of it pouring into his consciousness at once. He saw power generation systems that could turn a single star into an energy source for 1 billion worlds. Consciousness transfer protocols that could let people live forever by moving between bodies. Matter reconstruction technology that could create anything from nothing, ending scarcity forever. Terraforming protocols that could turn dead rocks into garden worlds in weeks instead of centuries. Medical advances that could eliminate disease across 100 species, cure conditions that currently had no hope. And yes, weapons. God, the weapons. Jake saw devices that could crack planets like eggs. Technology that could ignite stars or snuff them out. Gravity wells that could crush entire fleets. Dimensional weapons that could erase things from existence so completely it was like they'd never been born. The architects had built tools that could reshape reality itself, and they'd locked them away because they understood what Jake was starting to understand. This much power didn't make you a god. It made you a monster. Almost there, Jake said, sweat beading on his forehead. His whole body was glowing now, golden light spreading from the birthmark across his skin like veins of fire. He could feel the systems responding to him, recognizing him as the legitimate heir, ready to obey any command he gave. The extremists watched greedily. Vex's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Even some of the expedition members, the ones who weren't hostages, were leaning forward with barely concealed hunger. Everyone wanted what the architects had left behind. Everyone thought they knew best how to use it. But Jake had seen what the archive keeper showed him. He'd witnessed the final meeting of the architects, felt their grief and horror as they realized what their gifts had become. He'd experienced their debate, felt the weight of their impossible choice. They could have used their weapons to force peace. They could have become tyrants, ruling the galaxy with an iron fist, preventing wars through threat of annihilation. Some had argued for this. Better to be hated dictators than to watch their children burn themselves out. But they'd chosen something else. Something harder. They'd chosen to let go. The architects had encoded their knowledge into sleeper bloodlines and then committed species-wide suicide, unable to watch the destruction but unwilling to become the monsters required to stop it. They'd left one final gift, one last protocol that they'd built but never had the courage to activate. The Democratic Inheritance Protocol. Jake found it in the system, buried deep, flagged with a message that felt like it had been written directly to him across 12,000 years. If you have found this, you are the heir we hoped would come. You carry our blood but not our mistakes. The choice we could not make, we leave to you. It's ready, Jake said, opening his eyes. The interface was fully active now, waiting for his command. He could feel the weapons vaults responding, ready to open. Ready to put unimaginable power into the hands of whoever he chose. Or he could choose something different. Finally, Vex breathed. Open them. Show me the arsenal that will reshape the galaxy. Jake looked at Kelly. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else there too. Trust. She believed in him, even now, even with a weapon to her head. He looked at the archive keeper's hologram. She nodded slightly, a gesture of encouragement. Then Jake made his choice. Instead of opening the weapons vaults, his hands moved across the interface in a different pattern. He activated the Democratic Inheritance Protocol, the failsafe the architects had built for exactly this moment. What are you doing? Vex demanded. That's not the weapons vault. No, Jake agreed. It's something better. Golden light exploded from the control panel, from Jake's body, from the pyramid itself. It spread like a wave, activating every dormant architect system on Terminus Prime, then jumping through the ancient network to every corner of the galaxy. Everywhere the architects had built infrastructure, the light reached, and systems that had been sleeping for 12,000 years began to wake. But Jake wasn't opening weapons vaults. He was sharing knowledge. The Democratic Inheritance Protocol took everything valuable in the architect database, the medical advances, the clean energy, the agricultural technology, the manufacturing techniques, the terraforming protocols, everything that could save lives and improve civilizations, and broadcast it freely to every species in the galaxy simultaneously. No patents. No restrictions. No one species getting an advantage over others. Just pure knowledge, given freely to everyone at once. The weapons systems, though? Those Jake locked down completely. He set requirements that would make them impossible to access. 99% of all galactic civilizations would need to agree before the vaults could open. An impossible threshold designed to ensure that mutual destruction remained forever out of reach. No. Vex screamed, realizing what Jake had done. You fool. You just gave away godhood. Yeah, Jake said, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. That was kind of the point. Vex raised his weapon, finger tightening on the trigger. But the pyramid responded faster than any living being could. Ancient defensive systems activated, recognizing a threat to the air. Force fields appeared, separating the extremists from everyone else, holding them suspended in bubbles of frozen time. Kelly scrambled away from Vex's frozen form, breathing hard. Jake, are you insane? Do you have any idea what you just did? I ended it, Jake said, collapsing to his knees. The glow was fading from his skin, leaving him feeling hollow and exhausted. I ended the whole stupid game. No one gets to be God. Everyone gets the same tools to build a better future. And the weapons stay locked forever. The archive keeper knelt beside him, her holographic form looking more solid than it had any right to. Well done, Air. You have done what we could not. You let go of power instead of clinging to it. My ancestors were idiots, Jake said weakly. All this technology, and they never thought to just share it. They were afraid, the archive keeper said gently. Afraid that sharing everything at once would cause chaos. That some species would use the knowledge to dominate others. But you realized something we did not. Giving everyone the same advantages creates balance, not chaos. Over the next few hours, as station security arrived to take the extremists into custody, Jake learned what his choice had meant. Across the galaxy, governments were scrambling as architect knowledge flooded their databases. Scientists were shouting with joy as medical cures appeared in their computers. Engineers were weeping as they saw clean energy designs that would end their world's power crises. Farmers were celebrating as agricultural techniques promised to end hunger. It wasn't all smooth. Some governments were angry that Jake had squandered the architect legacy. Military leaders were furious that the weapons remained locked. Corporate entities that had hoped to monopolize architect technology were screaming about lost profits. But the people? The ordinary citizens of 100 different species? They were celebrating. 6 months later, Jake was back on his cargo ship, hauling freight through newly stabilized trade lanes. He turned down every title, every position, every offer of power that had come flooding in. He was just Jake Morrison from Cleveland, who happened to have a glowing birthmark and had once made the biggest decision in galactic history. Kelly visited sometimes. She'd been promoted to Earth's ambassador to the reformed Galactic Consortium, and their working relationship had slowly become something warmer. Something that felt like it might turn into more, given time. You ever regret it? She asked during one visit, sharing terrible coffee in Jake's tiny ship galley. You could have been an emperor. You could have had anything. I can barely manage to keep this ship running, Jake said, smiling. What would I do with an empire? His birthmark still glowed faintly sometimes, especially when he passed near architect technology. He remained the only living genetic key to those locked weapons vaults. That responsibility weighed on him every day, knowing that he was the sole keeper of technology that could end civilizations. But he slept well at night. Because Jake had learned what his ancestors couldn't. That the measure of a person wasn't in how much power they could seize, but in how wisely they could let it go. That real strength wasn't in standing above others, but in lifting them up beside you. As his ship jumped through the portal network his ancestors had built, Jake thought about that joke he'd made at the reception all those months ago. He really had been the lost prince, the heir to an ancient empire. He just wasn't the kind anyone expected. And maybe that was the most human thing about him, choosing community over dominance, choosing to empower others instead of himself, choosing to be just a freight hauler who'd once saved the galaxy by refusing to rule it. The architects had built wonders and then destroyed themselves trying to control everything. Jake Morrison had inherited their legacy and chosen to share it instead. Somewhere in the quantum foam of space-time, Jake liked to think his ancestors were finally resting easy, knowing that their final heir had been wise enough to make the choice they couldn't. The choice to let go.